I still remember the sound of the heart monitor, its steady beeping, filling the sterile hospital room. I remember the cold press of the IV in my arm, the fluorescent lights flickering overhead, and most of all, the silence. The kind of silence that makes your skin crawl, because it wasn't just quiet, it was absence. My parents had just walked out of the room. They didn't cry. They didn't hold my hand. They didn't even say goodbye. My father had simply looked at his watch, muttered something about timing, and my mother had folded her arms and said, "We can't afford this. Zach has regionals next month. We're already stretched." I was 16. I had just been told I needed emergency surgery after a cycling accident, left me with internal bleeding and a risk of permanent paralysis. The doctors were blunt without intervention. There was no guarantee I'd be able to walk again. There was a procedure, but it had to happen within hours. And it wasn't cheap, but it could work. It could give me back my future. Except my parents said no. Zach, my older brother, had a scholarship to protect, a future in sports to chase. Basketball had always been his everything, and by extension, theirs. They called him our legacy, our miracle boy, the one with the gift. Every cent they saved went to his training, his gear, his travel. I was the afterthought, the quiet girl, the support act. So when I got hurt, I shouldn't have been surprised. Still, nothing prepared me for hearing my mother say the words out loud. "We can't throw away Zach's future on a maybe." She looked me in the eye as she said it. A maybe. I was a maybe. The doctor tried to explain the risks again. They shook their heads. My mom said something about God's plan. My dad stared at the floor like it had nothing to do with him. And then they left. That was the moment I felt something inside me break. Not like a bone clean and sudden, but like a rope snapping under pressure strand by strand until there was nothing holding it together anymore. I lay there numb as the door closed behind them. A nurse came in a few minutes later. Her eyes were kind, too kind. She asked if they were coming back. I didn't answer. I didn't cry. I just stared at the door like maybe if I looked long enough it would open again and this would all turn out to be some kind of test. But it didn't. And somewhere beneath the shock and the heartbreak, something else began to grow. Not hate, not yet. Something colder. A quiet kind of resolve. If they weren't going to fight for me, I would fight for myself. Somehow. I didn't know how long I had. The pain was getting worse. My breath felt shallow. The machines around me started to sound louder, more urgent. And still the room remained empty. That was when I remembered someone. A name. A number I had memorized once long ago, even though I was told to forget it. Aunt Ellie. My mother's older sister. The one who never visited. The one who once gave me a book for my 10th birthday and was told to stop putting ideas in her head. The one who used to send postcards with no return address and once told me I had eyes like a fighter. I asked the nurse to call her. I wasn't even sure the number would work. I hadn't seen her in years. But 15 minutes later, the door burst open. She didn't say anything. She didn't ask what happened. She took one look at me, pale, trembling, hooked to machines, and said to the nurse, "What needs to be signed?" She signed everything. She told them to prep the OR. She brushed my hair off my forehead and said, "You're not done. Not yet." And then I passed out. I woke up after the surgery to her voice low and steady reading a book beside my bed. Her hand wrapped around mine like an anchor. Her eyes were tired, but fierce. "You're okay," she whispered. "You're safe now." And for the first time in days, I believed it. What I didn't know, what I couldn't know then, was that this moment, this abandonment, this sharp, unforgettable wound, would become the beginning of something far bigger. A fire that would grow slowly, patiently, and one day turn everything they built into ashes. But not through revenge, through something much stronger, consequence. Growing up, I used to think every family was like mine, that some kids just mattered more than others, that love came with conditions, that silence was normal, and that you should be grateful was another way of saying don't expect too much. Zach was always the center of everything. From the time he was 5 and picked up a basketball, my parents became different, more intense, more focused. It was like they saw in him their second chance at greatness. My dad, a former athlete who never made it past community college ball, called Zach his redemption. My mom treated him like a celebrity. His trophies lined the mantle, his schedules dictated our lives. I wasn't jealous at first. I was proud even. I clapped the loudest at his games. I made signs. I cheered. But eventually, I started to notice the pattern. When I brought home straight A's, they nodded and told me to keep it up, but only after asking if I had remembered to clean Zach's uniform. When I made the honor roll, my dad said, "Good. That means you won't be a burden." When I got my first part-time job at 14, my mom asked if I could use the money to help with Zach's travel costs for state tournaments. That was love in our house, transactional prioritized, and always centered around him. Christmases were the hardest. One year I opened a book I'd already read 3 times from the library. Zach unwrapped a signed jersey and a new pair of shoes that cost more than I made in 6 months. My mom laughed it off. Well, he's got real potential, honey. It's an investment. An investment. I was never an investment. I was the insurance policy, the just in case, the plan B. They never said it outright, of course. That would have been too honest. But it showed in the way they looked at me, the way they celebrated Zach and managed me. They always said I was independent, easy, no trouble. What they meant was invisible. I learned to lower my expectations. I learned that asking for attention was selfish and needing help made me weak. So I became quiet. I became good at vanishing. I became the girl who handled things alone. But it was never enough. Zach could do no wrong. Even when he messed up a failed test, a party that got out of hand the time he crashed my mom's car, there was always a reason, always an excuse. He's under pressure. He's going places. He just needs support. Meanwhile, if I came home 5 minutes late, I was unreliable. If I disagreed with them, I was ungrateful. If I cried, I was dramatic. Once I told my mom I felt like they didn't care about me the way they cared about Zach. Her response, "Don't be ridiculous. You're not in competition. Zach has goals. You should be proud to support him." I stopped trying to explain after that. I wasn't perfect either. I made mistakes. I snapped. I lied once about where I was going just to get a break from the pressure. But unlike Zach, my mistakes weren't allowed to fade. They were marked, remembered, tallied against me. Still, I kept trying. I joined the yearbook club. I tutored kids at the library. I took care of everything at home when my mom had surgery, cleaning, cooking, helping Zach with homework while he lounged in bed playing Xbox. I thought maybe, just maybe, if I worked hard enough, they'd see me. They didn't. The last birthday I spent with them, I didn't get a single present, not even a card. Zach had a game that day, so we all went to his tournament. They forgot to say happy birthday until I reminded them during dinner. My mom laughed and said, "Well, you're not a kid anymore. You don't need all that." She gave Zach a new smartwatch 2 weeks later, just because. I remember sitting in my room that night staring at the ceiling and thinking maybe I was the problem. Maybe I was just unlovable. That thought followed me around like a shadow. Until the accident. It had been a normal weekend. I was biking back from the library, headphones in the wind crisp on my face. A car didn't see the stop sign. I didn't have time to swerve. I woke up in the hospital with pain exploding in my abdomen and a nurse telling me not to move. The tests came fast. The scans, the worried whispers, internal bleeding, compressed spine, possible nerve damage. But there was hope. A surgical team on standby. A narrow window, yes, but a real chance at full recovery. All they needed was consent. And money. And that's when the truth was laid bare. My parents showed up. My mom was dressed for errands. My dad had his phone in his hand the whole time. They asked one question, how much? When the doctor told them, they both looked at each other, then at the floor. "We just can't," my mother said. "But Zach," my dad added, "he's got nationals next month. The scouts." I remember the doctor's face. I remember how she blinked confused, like she couldn't quite believe what she was hearing. I couldn't either. I asked, "You're really going to let me—" My voice cracked. I didn't finish the sentence. My mom stepped forward, smoothed my hair down like I was 5, and said, "We have to make choices, sweetheart. Zach's future is certain. Yours, well, we just don't know." And then they left. Not a tear, not a pause, just a door closing. And in that moment, every birthday, every missed celebration, every time they brushed me aside, it all came back. It wasn't about surgery, it wasn't about money, it was about value. They didn't see me as someone worth saving, but someone else did. I don't remember much from the first few hours after they left, just a blur of pain, fear, and the sound of machines beeping rhythmically like a countdown I couldn't stop. Somewhere in that haze, the nurse returned her expression strained but kind. She asked gently if there was anyone else to contact. I didn't have much of a list, just one name. Aunt Ellie, I whispered. My voice felt foreign in my throat, dry, strained, uncertain. I hadn't spoken to her in over a year, not since my parents had cut her off. They said she was too opinionated, disruptive, not family-oriented. The truth. She saw through them. She always had. The last time I saw her was when I was 14. She showed up at one of Zach's tournaments, gave me a book on women inventors, and told me I was meant for bigger things than sidelines. My mom told her not to come around again after that. But I remembered her number. I had memorized it without telling anyone, like a secret lifeline I might never need. Turns out I did. The nurse stepped out to make the call. I stared at the ceiling, unsure if Ellie would even pick up. Unsure if she would remember me. Unsure if she'd care. But 10 minutes later, I heard rushed footsteps in the hallway. The door slammed open. There she was, Aunt Ellie. Her curly hair was wild from the wind, her jacket slung halfway off her shoulders, a tote bag hanging from one arm. She looked older than I remembered, but no less fierce. Her eyes scanned the room, landed on me, and her whole face changed. "Oh my God, Emma," she breathed. She rushed to my side, her hands hovering over mine, unsure where to touch without hurting me. What happened? What did they do? I opened my mouth, but no words came. Just tears. She looked around, eyes narrowing. "Where are your parents?" I just shook my head. A moment passed, a cold, dense moment, and then her whole posture shifted. Shoulders squared, voice hard. "All right, we're doing this my way now." Within seconds, she was out in the hallway demanding to speak to the doctor. I could hear her voice rising, not frantic, but firm. Authoritative. Unshakable. "She's a minor," she was saying. "Her legal guardians have abandoned her. I'm her aunt. I have identification. Get your social worker in here now." Everything moved fast after that. The hospital staff confirmed that my parents had signed a refusal of care document and left the premises. The social worker came in with paperwork. Aunt Ellie signed it all without hesitation. Then she pulled a checkbook from her tote bag and asked the billing coordinator for the amount. "We'll figure it out," she said, glancing over at me. "Get her what she needs. The surgery happened within the hour." I remember being wheeled down the hall, Ellie walking beside the stretcher, holding my hand. "You're not going anywhere," she said. "Not on my watch." It wasn't just the surgery that saved me. It was her. She didn't just step in, she stepped up. Where others had walked away, she dug in. Fierce, relentless, unapologetic. While I recovered in post-op, she was on the phone, calling insurance companies, contacting lawyers, searching for programs. Anything to get me the support I needed. She told the school what happened and withdrew me. She brought books from the library. She brought her laptop. She made plans. "You're coming home with me as soon as they release you," she said. And that's exactly what happened. 3 days later, we walked out of the hospital, me in a wheelchair, thin and pale. Her with 3 bags strapped across her shoulders, pushing me with one hand and carrying a to-go coffee in the other. We didn't look like a victory photo, but that's what it was. Her apartment was small. 1 bedroom, 1 fold-out couch, stacks of books on every surface. But it felt more like home than anywhere else I'd been. She made me soup, told me stories about her college days, let me choose what movie to watch at night. She let me rest. She let me talk when I was ready. She let me be angry. And I was. Deep down under the relief, under the exhaustion, I was angry. Not just because they abandoned me, but because they'd done it so casually. Like it was a simple math problem. Zach's future. Emma's life. That was the equation. But Aunt Ellie didn't let me stay in that place for long. She handed me a notebook one night, a plain spiral-bound journal. "Write it down," she said. "Every thought, every feeling, every plan. Start taking your life back." So I did. Slowly, shakily, I wrote. At first, it was just pain, confusion, questions that had no answers. Then came memories, the pattern, the ways they'd made me invisible long before the hospital. And then plans. I started tutoring online again. At first, just for something to do. But word spread. I was good at explaining things, especially math. Soon I had 6 students, then 10. I built a website, a brand, Study Strong with Emma. Aunt Ellie helped me with the legal side, registered it properly, got a bank account, we ran it like a business, and I saved every dollar. Meanwhile, my parents posted photos of Zach on Facebook holding trophies wearing medals standing under college banners. The caption always said the same thing: "We've sacrificed everything for his dream." They had no idea I was alive and rebuilding. They had no idea what I was planning. And I was planning something, not revenge, truth. Because one day they would come to me, and when they did, I'd be ready. The recovery wasn't easy. The surgery saved my life, but it didn't magically restore everything. I had to learn how to sit up again without my body trembling. I had to learn to walk across a room without needing to grip furniture for support. My muscles were weak. My energy came in short bursts like flickers of power in a dying flashlight. But every day Aunt Ellie was there. She wasn't soft or overly sentimental. She didn't whisper sweet encouragement or pretend it wasn't hard. She just showed up. Every single morning, she put my oatmeal on the table, refilled my water bottle, adjusted the heating pad, and said, "Let's try again today." And I did. Bit by bit, I started getting stronger. I'd walk a little farther, sit a little straighter, breathe a little deeper. But my healing wasn't just physical. The biggest wound was invisible, the quiet realization that the people who brought me into this world could walk away from me just because I wasn't the one they were betting on. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want attention. I wanted purpose. So I focused. While I was stuck at home during recovery, I started tutoring again. I'd done it in the past to earn pocket money, but this time it felt different, urgent, real. Aunt Ellie helped me set up a proper website. Nothing fancy, just a clean page with my name, my story part of it anyway, and the subjects I taught. I specialized in algebra, geometry, SAT prep. Within 2 weeks, I had 3 regular students. By the end of the month, I had 12. And then came the emails. Parents telling me their kids were finally getting it. One even said I had changed her daughter's entire outlook on school. I printed that email out and taped it to the wall above my laptop. I wasn't just surviving, I was building. With each paycheck, I tucked money away. I created a spreadsheet to track my earnings. I started reading up on business development, digital marketing, scalable learning platforms. I wasn't just tutoring, I was designing a program. At night, when Aunt Ellie was asleep, I'd stay up sketching out ideas in my notebook. Online courses, workshops, scholarships for low-income girls. I wasn't sure how or when, but I knew this would be something mine. Meanwhile, my parents were still pretending I didn't exist. Zach had made it to a Division I school. My mom posted about it nonstop, so proud of our boy, the future is bright. All those early mornings paid off. They never mentioned me, never asked where I went, never wondered how I was. It was almost laughable. They had erased me so thoroughly I might as well have never been born. But that was fine, because I was erasing them too right out of my future. Aunt Ellie kept pushing me to take things further. "Your program is working," she said one afternoon, sipping coffee at the kitchen table while I answered emails. "You've got students in 3 different states now. Have you thought about expanding?" I shrugged. Yeah, but I'm still technically a high school dropout." She narrowed her eyes. "Only because you almost died. I still don't have a diploma. You don't need one to be a founder." That night I applied for my GED. I passed within a month. Then I applied to community college, just 2 online courses to start psychology and business ethics. I aced both. I kept going. Within a year, I had enough credits to transfer into a full undergraduate program. With scholarships, grants, and my own tutoring income, I didn't need a dime from anyone else. I was paying my way. By the time I turned 19, I had a fully registered tutoring agency, a small staff of contract teachers, and my name was circulating in parent forums across the state. Still, I kept a low profile. No interviews, no features, no social media. I wasn't ready yet. But I was getting there. One day, Aunt Ellie came home from work holding a manila envelope. "You got a letter?" she said, tossing it onto the table. It was from a local educational nonprofit. They were hosting a mentorship summit and inviting women in education to speak. Somehow, someone had heard about me. "I didn't apply for this," I said, eyebrows raised. "You didn't have to," she replied. "You're making waves." I hesitated. It would mean standing on stage, sharing my work, my story, maybe even my name. "They'll know," I whispered. She nodded. "Let them." So I said yes. And that decision would change everything. The day of the summit arrived with soft gray skies and an air of nervous anticipation. Aunt Ellie drove me to the venue, her car filled with the scent of cinnamon mints and the faint hum of classical music. As we pulled into the parking lot, she reached over and squeezed my hand. "Whatever happens today," she said, "you're not that scared kid in a hospital bed anymore. You're the woman who built something out of nothing." I nodded, but my stomach twisted as I stepped out of the car. The building was sleek and modern, filled with community leaders, educators, and policy directors. I had been invited to join a panel titled Youth Empowerment Through Education Access. I wasn't sure what they expected me to say, but I knew what I was going to say. They had given me 10 minutes to speak. I had practiced it over and over again the night before pacing the living room, while Aunt Ellie offered quiet nods of encouragement between bites of toast. When they called my name and I stepped on stage, the lights were hot, the room quiet. A few hundred faces turned to me, some curious, some skeptical. I took a breath. "My name is Emma Hale," I began. "I'm the founder of Learn Forward, a tutoring and mentorship platform that now serves over 200 students across the country. But 2 years ago, I was lying in a hospital bed fighting to survive while the people who were supposed to protect me walked away. The silence sharpened. They didn't leave because they were broke. They left because they believed my brother's future, his sports career, his scholarships, was worth more than my life. They chose him, and they made that choice with clear eyes and dry cheeks. I saw heads tilt, eyebrows rise. I survived. Barely. Because someone else stepped in, my aunt, a woman they once dismissed as too emotional. She saved me. And more than that, she showed me that my value wasn't something to be calculated on a family spreadsheet. I paused. "I'm not here to name names or tell you how to parent. I'm here to tell you what happens when girls are told repeatedly that they are second place. What happens when they are told their pain is an inconvenience, their dreams a distraction, their survival negotiable." People were leaning in now, phones down, eyes up. I'm here because I didn't disappear. I didn't become bitter. I became loud and smart and useful and unafraid. Applause broke out, not thunderous, but solid, genuine. I looked out into the crowd, and then I saw them. My parents, standing near the exit doors. My mother looked smaller than I remembered, her mouth slightly open. My father stood beside her, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. They hadn't clapped. They hadn't expected this. I walked off stage with my heart pounding. The panel continued without me, but I didn't hear any of it. I just found a quiet hallway, sat on a bench, and tried to steady my breathing. They found me 15 minutes later. "Emma," my mom said cautiously, like she wasn't sure if she was allowed to say my name. I looked up. "We didn't know," she said. "You didn't want to know," I replied, calm. "We heard about your business," my dad added. "We saw your name on the invitation list." "Congratulations," I said flatly. There was an awkward pause. Then she said it. "We made a mistake." A laugh caught in my throat. Not joyful, not cruel, just stunned. "You left me to die," I said. "That's not a mistake. That's a decision." My mom looked like she might cry, but I didn't care. I didn't want tears. "I mean it," she said. "We were scared. Zach had recruiters coming. He had offers. We thought you'd be okay." "You didn't think at all," I interrupted. "You calculated. You put everything on him and left me behind." They shifted uncomfortably. My dad cleared his throat. "We've fallen on hard times." I almost smiled. There it was. The contracts dried up after Zach tore his ACL, he said. The scholarship's gone. The clinics didn't call back. People stopped answering our emails. "Why are you telling me this?" I asked. They exchanged a glance. We were hoping maybe you could help us, my mom said. You've built something incredible. Maybe we could help each other. Help each other? I repeated, stunned. We've got experience with college consulting, my dad offered. Maybe we could collaborate. I stared at them. This wasn't reconciliation. This was desperation. I stood up slowly. You didn't check on me after surgery. You didn't call. You didn't message. You didn't even say my name for 2 years. We're saying it now, my mom whispered. It's too late. And then I said the sentence I'd been holding for so long. I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. They looked stunned. My mother opened her mouth, but no words came out. I walked away, not in triumph, not in cruelty, just in peace. They had come to me as if I were still that invisible girl in the hospital bed, easy to ignore, easy to manipulate. But I wasn't that girl anymore. I was Emma Hale. And they'd never forget what they chose to sacrifice. After that conversation, I didn't hear from them for months. No voicemails, no emails, no just checking in texts. But word travels in small towns, and even faster in tight-knit academic communities. Within weeks of the summit, people started asking quiet questions about my parents' consulting firm, the one they'd built around Zach's promise and a curated image of their perfect parenting philosophy. A few educators emailed me directly. One wrote, I didn't know. I wish I had sooner. Another canceled their consulting package with my parents entirely and said it just didn't feel right anymore. I never told them to do anything. I never named my parents during the speech, but the story told itself. And without their golden child, without Zach's athletic rise to fame to keep their narrative alive, the rest of it crumbled. Their website went dark. Their social pages stopped updating. A year later, their business registration was listed as inactive. I didn't celebrate. That wasn't the point. But still, I felt something settle in me, like a long unfinished song had finally reached its last note. Back in our little rental house, Aunt Ellie and I continued living the life we'd built quietly together. She never asked about the summit. I think she knew without needing details. Instead, we started a new routine. In the mornings, she'd leave a sticky note on the fridge. First tutoring session at 10 oatmeals on the stove. In the evenings, we'd drink chamomile tea and watch cooking shows with old plaid blankets across our laps. We laughed more. We argued over which contestant would win. We shared silence like it was something sacred. I was still tutoring more than ever now. I had over 30 students, 2 part-time assistants, and a contract pending with a local school district to provide after-school support for low-income families. But beyond the numbers, beyond the reach, something else was growing. Me. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. Not because someone was looking at me, but because I was no longer hiding. I wore my own clothes, not leftovers from Zach's team booster sales or whatever was on discount at our old family budget store. I put my name on my projects. I looked in mirrors and didn't flinch. And I stopped chasing love from people who needed me small in order to feel big. One day I was sitting in a coffee shop grading essays when a girl about 15 slid into the chair across from me. Are you Emma Hale? She asked. I looked up. Yes, my school counselor said you used to be sick. And now you run like this whole thing. I smiled. Something like that. She paused. How'd you do it? And I knew what she was really asking. How did you survive being invisible? I leaned forward and said, what I wish someone had told me at 15, I stopped waiting to be chosen. I chose myself. She blinked. I saw her absorb it, and something in her posture changed. Okay, she said. Cool. That same week, my inbox dinged with a new message. Subject line, Scholarship Application Inquiry, Emma Hale Foundation. The girl from the cafe had already applied. It hit me then. This was the legacy I wanted, not a confrontation, not a courtroom, not a scandal. Just a quiet, steady rebuilding that sent out ripples to kids like me. Girls who were told they were too plain, too average, too expensive. Girls who were whispered over, overlooked, or offered up as sacrifice. I couldn't change what had happened to me, but I could make sure fewer girls had to face the same choice between survival and someone else's ambition. So I did. I hired a board of advisors, mostly women, some who'd worked in education, some in social services. All of them had lived through some form of quiet erasure. We started fundraising. Then came the pilot program, 10 scholarships for girls facing medical and financial hardship. No essays, no test scores, just stories. One of the first recipients wrote me a letter. I thought I didn't matter. I thought no one would ever pick me. But you did. I cried when I read it. Not because I was sad, but because I had been her. And someone Aunt Ellie had picked me too. I framed the letter and put it next to my desk. It's still there. Sometimes I look at it when I feel tired or small, or like the world might forget girls like us again. And I remember they won't. Not if we keep telling the truth. Not if we keep showing up. Not if we keep building something better. It was a rainy Thursday afternoon when they showed up again. I had just finished a Zoom call with a new scholarship partner and was pouring tea when my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Emma, please, we just want to talk. We're outside." I froze. Outside, I walked slowly to the front window and peeked through the curtain. There they were, my mother holding an umbrella soaked to the knees, and my father standing awkwardly under the awning, hands deep in his pockets, like they didn't know what to do with them. Aunt Ellie wasn't home. I was alone. I opened the door. We stared at each other for a long, uncomfortable moment. It had been over a year since the summit. They looked different, smaller, worn out. My father's graying temples were more visible now. My mother's eyes, once sharp with judgment, seemed dimmed by something heavier, exhaustion maybe, or shame. "May we come in?" my mother asked. I stepped aside without answering. They entered quietly, dripping water on the entryway rug. I didn't offer tea. I didn't offer to take their coats. I just stood, arms crossed. "What do you want?" "We wanted to see you," my father said quickly. "In person." "I thought you saw me plenty the last time," I said. He winced. My mother took a slow breath. "Emma, we know we don't deserve anything from you. But things have changed." I raised an eyebrow. "Let me guess. Zach's knee never healed. The offers dried up. The clients stopped calling." Silence. "You told the world he had a promising future," I added. "Turns out he's human, like the rest of us." "That's not fair," my mother began, then stopped herself. "Actually, it is." She reached into her bag and pulled out a thin, wrinkled envelope. She held it out. "What's that, a letter?" she said softly. "Not asking for anything. Just the truth. If you're willing to read it." I didn't take it. Not yet. Why now? Because we lost everything my father admitted. And somehow, even after all that, we still haven't felt worse than we do seeing you succeed without us. My throat tightened. I wasn't expecting that. Not the honesty, not the weight of it. "I'm not doing what I do to spite you," I said. "We know," my mother whispered. "We saw your website, the testimonials, the scholarship fund." She swallowed hard. "You became everything we claimed to be." I didn't respond. She stepped closer. "Emma, you're better than we ever gave you credit for. I see that now, and I'm sorry we couldn't see it sooner." There it was, the apology I thought I wanted. But it didn't feel like enough. "I nearly died," I said, voice flat. "And you walked out of that hospital room like you were late for lunch." Tears filled her eyes. "We thought we were doing the right thing. For Zach. For the family." "No," I snapped. "You were doing the easiest thing. The thing that let you keep your golden boy on his path while I disappeared quietly." They looked stunned by the coldness in my voice. But it was the truth. I wasn't going to cushion it anymore. "I don't want your guilt," I said. "I don't need your recognition. What I needed was a parent, and I had to find one in someone you pushed out years ago." My father's head lowered. "Aunt Ellie always said we were wrong." "She was right," I replied. A beat of silence passed. Then my mother spoke again, her voice shaking. "We came to say we're proud of you, and to ask if you'd ever let us be part of your life again. Not to fix what we broke, just to know you, however you'll allow it." I studied them. And for the first time, I didn't see giants, or monsters, or villains. I saw two people flawed, scared, trying too late to be decent. I'll read the letter. I said finally, but that's it. I'm not promising anything. They nodded. Thank you, my mother said, voice cracking. They left without trying to hug me. That was smart. I stood in the doorway for a long time, the envelope warm in my hand from her grip. I didn't open it, not that day. Maybe not that week. But eventually I would. Later that evening, Aunt Ellie returned home with groceries and the smell of rosemary clinging to her coat. You okay? She asked. They came by. She paused only briefly. You let them in just for a few minutes. And they apologized. They looked different. She nodded slowly as if it was exactly what she expected and yet not what she hoped. You didn't owe them anything, she said gently. I know. She didn't press further. Instead, she handed me a mug of tea and sat beside me on the couch. We watched the rain dance across the window pane in silence. They wanted to know me again, I said softly. She tilted her head toward me. Well, she said, that's a privilege, not a right. I smiled. Exactly. I didn't open the letter for 3 weeks. It sat on the bookshelf in my room, tucked between old notebooks and the lavender-scented candle Aunt Ellie bought me last Christmas. I'd glance at it sometimes while brushing my hair or folding laundry. But I didn't touch it. Not because I was afraid of what it said, but because I already knew. It wouldn't change the past. No apology could. Still, one Sunday afternoon, with sunlight spilling across the floor and Aunt Ellie dozing on the porch, I picked it up. The handwriting was familiar. Slanted, neat petits, like the way my mother used to label our lunchboxes. The letter was quiet. There was no dramatic confession, no excuses, just a string of sentences that for once weren't meant to convince me of anything. She wrote about my birth, how small I was, how I once held her finger in the incubator and wouldn't let go, how even then she said she felt afraid of what it would mean to love me deeply. She wrote about Zach, how much pressure they'd put on him, how their dreams became burdens, how when he got injured, they saw everything they'd built slipping away and made a choice they thought they could justify. But they couldn't, and they knew that now. She ended the letter with a single sentence that stuck with me for days. You taught us something we should have learned long ago, that love is not earned through usefulness. It's given through presence. I folded the letter and placed it in a drawer, not out of bitterness, but to remind myself that sometimes the things we want most from people arrive when we no longer need them. Life didn't stop because they apologized. In fact, it accelerated. By spring, my tutoring initiative had expanded into a formal education nonprofit. We secured a grant that allowed us to provide laptops, transportation stipends, and even therapy services for students who came from unstable homes. Aunt Ellie and I moved into a small 2-bedroom house on a quiet street near a park. It had creaky floors, too many windows, and a wild garden that bloomed in defiance of every landscaping rule. I loved it immediately. We adopted a rescue dog, Max, a shaggy mutt with one floppy ear and a habit of stealing socks. My days became full in a way I'd never imagined when I was lying in that hospital bed, wondering why my life had been deemed too expensive to save. Every now and then, I'd get updates about Zach. He wasn't playing anymore. His injury had ended that dream. He was living in another state doing freelance work, and from what I gathered, keeping a low profile. I didn't feel anger toward him anymore. He wasn't the villain. He was just the symbol of a system that taught our parents one child was the hope and the other was the weight. But I had grown out of that story, and I wasn't interested in rewriting it. Instead, I was writing a new one on my terms. I spoke at conferences, joined panels about equitable access to education, and even started a podcast called Unwritten Daughters. It was about the girls who get left off the page, girls like me. And every time I stood in front of a microphone, I spoke slowly and clearly, not with rage, but with unwavering certainty. I had survived, and survival was just the prologue. One autumn morning, a letter arrived at the nonprofit's office, this time from a girl in Idaho, 16, recently kicked out of her home for being difficult. Her school counselor referred her to our scholarship program. She wrote, "I don't know if I'm worth saving, but I hope someone thinks I am." I cried when I read that, not just because I knew what it felt like to ask that question, but because I now had the power to answer it. I approved her scholarship that same day. Full coverage, no questions asked. That night I sat on the porch with Aunt Ellie and Max snoring at our feet. "You did good," she said, sipping her tea. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I watched the wind move through the trees, listened to the quiet hum of the world, and thought about how strange and beautiful it is that the deepest wounds don't always break us. Sometimes they become the roots of something unstoppable. "I'm not done," I said finally. She smiled. "Good. Neither am I." We sat there shoulder to shoulder, two women who had been underestimated, overlooked, and overruled, but who had never stopped believing in the power of choosing love over legacy. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need a headline. I just needed the chance to become more than what they expected. And I had. Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us the most are the ones who fail us in the deepest ways. They tell us we're too much or not enough. They label us with words like difficult, dramatic, burdensome, simply because we need something they're unwilling to give: time, support, care. And when that care is withheld at our most vulnerable, when our lives are reduced to numbers on a budget sheet, something inside us shifts. For a long time, I thought that shift was damage, that I'd never heal from the moment my parents walked out of that hospital room and left me there to die. But I was wrong, because what they didn't realize is that choosing to survive isn't just about staying alive. It's about reclaiming the story they tried to write for you. It's about saying, "I am not disposable. I am not optional. I am not the shadow of someone else's dreams." They believed they were investing in a future by sacrificing me. But what they really did was bury a seed, and that seed grew in silence. It grew in the care of a woman they dismissed in the corners of a yellow house, in the quiet pages of library books, and the glow of laptop screens. It grew with every student I tutored, every child I believed in, every young girl I told, "You matter, right now, as you are." It grew into a life far more powerful than they ever imagined. And when they came back broken, regretful, I realized that I had already done the most radical thing of all I had lived, fully, honestly, and on my own terms. Not out of spite, but out of something far stronger: clarity. Because revenge is fleeting, but becoming someone you're proud of, that's forever. So if you've ever been cast aside, overlooked, made to feel like your worth depends on how easy you are to love or how useful you are to others, I'm here to tell you, you are not a burden. You are not behind. You are not broken. You are a fire they couldn't put out. And the best part, you get to decide what burns next, the past or the path forward. I chose the path, and every step I take now is proof that sometimes the best way to win is to simply rise and never look back.